It is the morning of August 2nd, 1776, inside the assembly room of the Pennsylvania State House, the building we now call Independence Hall. The air is thick with summer heat and something heavier: fear. The windows are cracked just enough to let a faint breeze drift past green baize tablecloths. Quill pens rest beside inkwells. No audience waits outside. No crowd. No ceremony. Just 56 men preparing to commit the single greatest act of political defiance in modern history. A witness, Dr. Benjamin Rush, would later remember the scene as a moment of pensive and awful silence. 56 men about to write their names on what they openly called their death warrant. At one point, Benjamin Harrison, a large, jovial Virginian, leans toward the smaller, frailer Elbridge Gerry and jokes, "When we hang, I shall die in a moment, but you, sir, you will dance in the air an hour after I am gone." The laughter fades quickly, the fear does not. And as John Hancock steps forward to sign with a bold, sweeping flourish, we ask the question at the heart of this story. How did we get here? Why did these men choose treason? And what did it cost the world? This is Lost Pages. And tonight, we go back 20 years before that ink-touched parchment. The story begins long before independence in the 1750s, when the colonies were loyal, proud parts of the British Empire. The French and Indian War, fought from 1754 to 1763, reshaped North America. It was expensive, and when the smoke cleared, London faced a mountain of debt. Parliament decided the colonies should help pay for Britain's victory. New taxes followed. The Stamp Act of 1765 hit businesses and newspapers. The Townshend Acts of 1767 taxed glass, paper, and tea. To London, these were practical financial solutions. To many colonists, they were insults, laws imposed by a government thousands of miles away without their consent. But at this point, most Americans weren't dreaming of independence, they wanted fairness, representation, a say in decisions that affected their lives. They were still proud to be British, but only for now. Tension becomes bloodshed in 1770 when British soldiers fire into a crowd in Boston. The Boston Massacre becomes a propaganda explosion. Pamphlets, engravings, and tavern gossip turn the tragedy into a symbol of tyranny. 3 years later, in 1773, colonists board ships and dump 342 crates of tea into Boston Harbor. The Boston Tea Party is bold, outrageous, and impossible for Britain to ignore. The response is swift and brutal. The coercive acts, or intolerable acts. Boston Harbor is closed. Town meetings are restricted. The colony is treated like a rebellious teenager in lockdown. Word spreads everywhere, especially through taverns. In Philadelphia alone, by 1776, there are more than 120 taverns, places where merchants, sailors, and farmers trade news from Boston with more speed and passion than any official post. In September 1774, delegates from 12 colonies meet in Philadelphia's Carpenter's Hall. This is the First Continental Congress, but it is not a call for independence, it's more like a desperate intervention. They write petitions, they organize boycotts, they insist they are loyal to the crown, they just want their rights respected. Independence is still a radical fringe idea. Most Americans believe reconciliation is not only possible, but necessary to save as many lives as possible, but history rarely asks what people prefer. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched toward Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts to seize colonial weapons. Militia farmers meet them on the green A shot, no one knows from where, cracks the morning air. The British fire. The militia fire back. When the smoke clears, dozens are dead. The American Revolution begins before anyone formally decides there should be one. When the delegates return to Philadelphia a month later, they do not find a political dispute waiting for them, they find a war. The Second Continental Congress reconvenes in the Pennsylvania State House in May 1775. This time, they are forced to act like a government. They form the Continental Army. They appoint none other than the land surveyor and politician, George Washington, as commander. They scramble for gunpowder, funding, and diplomatic channels. And in a final attempt at peace, they send the olive branch petition to King George III, a heartfelt plea to avoid a full break. The king rejects it. Then goes further. He issues a proclamation of rebellion, declaring the colonies in open revolt. The door to reconciliation slams shut. In January 1776, a newcomer named Thomas Paine publishes a pamphlet that flips the entire debate upside down. Common sense argues that monarchy is a fraud, that a tiny island should not rule a continent. That independence isn't radical, It's obvious. It becomes a sensation. More than 100,000 copies circulate, an astronomical number for the era. For the first time, the ordinary citizens of the colonies, bakers, blacksmiths, farmers, tavern goers, begin to imagine a world without a king. Congress can feel the shift. Independence, once unthinkable, is now inevitable. On June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduces a bold resolution that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. Congress hesitates at first, but they quickly prepare. They appoint a committee of 5 to draft a declaration in case of approval. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert R. Livingston. Jefferson writes the first draft in a rented room in Philadelphia on a surprisingly warm summer day. For the season, he crafts a masterful text that blends Enlightenment philosophy in colonial grievances and a bold claim that all men are created equal. Much to his dismay, Adams and Franklin make revisions to his writing, but ultimately, the draft is ready and history awaits with great anticipation. The committee presents Jefferson's draft on June 28th. Congress spends the next several days debating, revising, and removing sections altogether. The most significant deletion of the Declaration was Jefferson's long-known condemnation of Britain's role in promoting the slave trade. It was cut due to pressure from southern colonies and some northern merchants despite moral questionability. The work is finally done behind closed doors, where there is no glamour to the process. By the morning of July 4th, the debate ends and the wording is finally approved. The colonies are about to announce their declaration to the world. On July 2nd, Congress votes on independence itself, and all 13 colonies vote yes, except New York, as they were to vote in favor later. This is America's official Independence Day. John Adams writes to his wife that July 2nd will be celebrated forever with pomp and fireworks. Only, he writes the wrong number because it is actually the 4th of July, and Congress finalizes the text and date that becomes the icon. That night, printer John Dunlap receives the manuscript and works into the early hours producing the first printed broadsides. Large, poster-style copies meant for distribution. On July 8th, the Declaration is read aloud in Philadelphia's State House yard and the crowd cheers as the church bells ring. On July 9th, Washington has it read to the Continental Army in New York City, and later, soldiers and civilians tear down a statue of King George III in celebration. And yet, no one has signed anything yet, and this is because the famous parchment does not exist, for now. On July 19th, Congress orders the Declaration to be engrossed, copied in an elegant, formal hand on a sheet of parchment. Military Colonel and Clerk Timothy Matlack, known for his skill with quill and iron gall ink, carefully writes out every word. The parchment is made from vellum, a treated animal skin, durable and smooth. The ink is thick, dark, and made to last centuries. 2 weeks later, on August 2nd, Congress gathers again in the assembly room. The parchment lies on the table. One by one, most of the 56 delegates step forward to sign. Others will add their names later as they arrive or receive authorization. A few never sign at all. There is no feast, no audience, no cameras, no crowds, just a room full of nervous men signing a document that could end their lives if the war goes badly. And as the final signature dries, the United States of America exists, not just in words, but in ink. As copies spread, reactions erupt. Patriots celebrate in the streets, loyalists mourn or flee. In New York, the king's statue is melted into musket balls. Britain dismisses the Declaration publicly, but privately treats it as pure treason. Every signer is now a wanted man. Across Europe, especially in France, philosophers and statesmen study the document with fascination. The ideas, equality, rights, consent of the governed will echo in revolutions to come. But the Declaration does not end the war. It does not create a government, and it does not fulfill its promises. Not yet. The words, "All men are created equal," hang in the air like a challenge, unanswered for generations. Our story ends in Philadelphia, but the true battle, the one to make these ideals real, is only beginning. Thank you for watching this video until the end, and if you liked what you saw here, please subscribe and comment down below on which historical event you want to see get covered next. All content here is made with artificial intelligence tools, but fact-checked and researched by our team. We hope to see you next time for another episode of Lost Pages History.